of Innovation Festival. We talked about the drivers for change for a new economy. Let's see if we can trump that today and make products great again. And joining me in the studio today for today's live event is two special guests. It's Rich Gilbert from the Agency of Design, and it's G from Enso Tires. Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
And we're going to make products great again. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the theme of today, right?
Wonderful, wonderful. And for everyone joining online, of course, you've joined because this event is called Making a Success of Product Service Systems. We're going to delve into what exactly is a product service system and which products might be suited and might not be suited for such a model. So if you've never heard of product service systems before, don't worry. Our experts are going to tell us exactly what they're all about. And we'll also be joined by a third person, Natasha, who'll be joining us from a brand new startup from New York. And she'll join us in about 20 minutes' time to tell us about a subscription model for women's everyday clothing. But first, I want to start with you, Rich. So Richard, we give you the onerous task of telling us product service systems, what does that mean?
What does that entail? Well, the clue's in the name, really. It's part product and part service. And the integration of the two into one offering for the consumer. So something that it has to involve at least a bit of hardware, I think. So I think of that in things like Dollar Shave Club, where you're getting subscriptions to razors and consumables delivered as part of the service. Things like Streetcar, where you're paying for access to cars, you're getting performance, you're getting a service, and you're getting some hardware kind of embedded in that. It's quite a big spectrum of what is entailed in that. I'd say some key elements are that you're not owning that product. For me, that's a kind of a red line. That there has to be some hardware. We're talking about things like Netflix and virtualized services, and for me, they sit in a slightly different category. That there's not any physical product involved there.
Right, so most people watching this will know what Netflix is or Spotify, and I've always given those as examples of what a product service system could look like. But I think what you two were both telling me earlier was that maybe they don't quite fit the model of a product service system. Is that right?
Well, it depends where you draw the line, really. Some of it's kind of semantics of what's included and what's not. But for me, I think of this in terms of from a slight hardware perspective, which is probably my bias because I'm kind of product designer by background. But we were talking about things like Love Film, where there's a service that you're sending out, you're receiving DVDs as part of a kind of ongoing subscription plan. Versus just going to a high street shop and buying discs. So that for me was product service system, whereas a completely virtualized thing, it becomes purely digital in its delivery, and that to me is just in the service category, really.
Okay, so I mean we're building up a picture of what a product service system looks like. If we had a list of check boxes, one is physical product. We reckon that's part of that. And when there's a physical product that's doing the rounds, that say I'm the company who owns the product and you are my subscriber or user, whatever it happens to be, at some point I'm going to want to get that physical product back from you. How does that mechanism work?
In lots of different ways. That's the kind of reverse logistics challenge of how do you get your hardware back again? I suppose what you've touched on there as well is that the fundamental difference is that as a manufacturer, you have this ongoing relationship with the customer. It's not just about everything focused on the sale of that product and getting, once you've got the sale, it's their product and there might be a bit of aftercare, but largely it's out of your hands. With a product service system, you have this kind of ongoing discourse. You're kind of continually trying to deliver a great service to them. So there might be you might be upgrading that product, you might be taking it back and fixing it, providing some new functions. So you want to streamline that process of being able to interchange products, being able to get things back, being able to continuously make that service better over time, because that's ultimately what you're going to start competing on. Once you've got lots of product service systems competing, it's the quality of the service that makes you kind of win in that marketplace.
And let's talk about the wins and the whys, because many people will be asking themselves, why should they subscribe to a car, a washing machine, whatever it happens to be, instead of owning it? Because for a very long time, I guess we've been convinced, if nothing else, that ownership is the pinnacle we should be aiming for.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we're always trying to find the place where it's a logical decision, or it's an easy decision to go for a product service system because maybe it's cheaper, maybe get rid of the upfront cost, maybe the reliability is better, maybe it's kind of getting rid of some hassle for you. But I kind of, on paper, product service systems are amazing because there's for a consumer you can get access to a better product for a lower price point. For manufacturers, you're getting much greater kind of utility out of that product. You're getting this ongoing revenue stream from your customer. But it begs the question: why are there not more product service systems if it's so great? And I do think we've kind of got I suppose we've got a history of buying. We've got a kind of a culture based around purchasing, really, that is historically. I look back at like growing up and the kind of the key things that you're kind of getting as you're growing up. You get into the habit of buying the kind of and some of those things become very important status symbols. They're important. They're kind of reflecting you as a person. You're trying to communicate who you are through these things that you've through the things that you own. So what gets interesting is how does that change over time? And we're actually talking in the studio the other day about whether that journey into consumption has changed a little bit. Because I was thinking about as I was kind of a teenager, sort of rites of passage of getting a CD collection, saving up and buying a nice stereo, buying a car, things like that. They're kind of big life moments, but they're based around purchases. But now a lot of those things don't really exist because you don't buy a CD collection. You have Spotify. Far fewer people are living in cities. They're not buying cars. Even things like buying mobile phones and stuff. People don't buy them anymore. They're on contracts that they see as kind of it's a monthly payment. Someone's looking after it, and at the end of that, you'll get rid of it and get a new one. So that kind of, I wonder whether we're starting to see the change of kind of an emerging subscription mindset. It's people getting used to. More comfortable with subscriptions and ongoing payments and access to things rather than ownership. And at that point, you probably start to interrogate the value that's giving you a lot more. When you're kind of, you get to the point where you're cruising through Netflix and you're thinking, there's nothing left to watch. And it's like, maybe I'll go to a different service. And you're challenging.
We pretty much have the same selection of films, so you don't really go to another service.
Try.
There are only a few examples of differentiation. There are leaders in those fields, and then the rest kind of like are in distant second and third place.
I want to tell you a story. A couple of days ago, I went on a bit of a road trip with one of my colleagues, and I said to her, "You bring the CDs, right? And let's have a sing-song on the way home." She said to me, "Colin, I'm 22 years old. I don't own any CDs."
No, exactly.
And I think we are moving into that sort of territory, aren't we?
I think we're in a post-consumer age, effectively, where if we treat our users effectively as value adds, it's a totally different dialogue, and I think for millennials in particular, and people who necessarily haven't gotten many different emerging markets, you have different values on ownership, and so there's the opportunity now with products and services to inject a certain vitality into the old industries that have always relied on products basically being sold and disposed and quite then tried to quicken that up, make it default or fail a bit earlier than usual. So we're now at the cusp, I think, on some interesting changes. And the question is really for companies, established companies and startups, is how do you embrace that change? Because there are definitely opportunities, but the challenge is that it all becomes much more upfront. You have to take a very active, proactive decision upfront to buy something as a service rather than buying it as a product, because the default that we have, from our great consumer economies is that we're all consumers. We're made to eat as much product as we can.
But in the B2B market, and I want to come onto your specific product very soon,
Absolutely.
G. But in the B2B market, is it not the case that it's more commonplace that you see product service systems in operation?
Absolutely. I mean, the best example of that, which everyone touts, of course, is that Rolls-Royce sells hours rather than actually jet engines, because it's more cost effective. We see that as well in our industry, tire industry, which where truck tires are often are taken back and are provided effectively per mile. But you don't see that often in the consumer space. It hasn't trickled down as much because the bedrock of many major companies is still listed, listed companies in particular, are still based on this kind of quarterly revenue streams that they need to kind of keep going. And turning to a circular model is a not only a revolution in their business plan, but is a revolution to their shareholders. So it's hard to change, besides all the legacy issues of changing from one model to another.
Sure.
But it's happening.
Do you think some of that is? I look at the kind of the difference between B2B and B2C, and I wonder whether there's just a kind of rational and emotional side to that as well. That you want to, when you're buying, you're looking at long-term benefits as a business, and you're making very rational, carefully calculated decisions.
Absolutely.
You're sitting down with a spreadsheet and you're working out the whole lifetime value of this kind of product, or the kind of value of this depreciated asset. As consumers, we shop with our hearts and, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is different. Oh, this is a bit shiny. And it's like, well, will this be about long-term value? Well, you don't think about that. You think about the kind
psychological release that you get, a positive psychological feel.
Absolutely. It's retail therapy. It's all those kind of things that we've kind of again, that we're culturally a bit embroiled in. That we're a bit predisposed to new things because they're kind of interesting and different, and and there's something going on there that we're just kind of intrigued and attached to that pace of change, and I often think about this in terms of we've got a bit of a kind of predisposition to short-term thinking as consumers, that we're really not very good at kind of thinking about long-term benefits versus short-term gains. It's like the classic example of like New Year's resolutions of kind of like, right, this year I'm gonna run a marathon, I'm gonna do this, and then it's like Tuesday evening, it's a bit drizzly, and you're like, actually, no, I think I'll just watch TV. It's like they kind of what we know is good for us in the long term versus what's fun and immediate and exciting now doesn't get equal weighting in our heads. So it's there's some of that plays really well to retail. Basically, that it's like I can buy this now and it's exciting and I've got something new and fun to play with. Whereas the kind of long term thinking doesn't really come into that.
Right, Rich, thank you. I just want to quickly say to the online audience, please do put your questions in, either on the page you're watching this on or through Twitter. Some people have done so already, and I'll get round to the questions that are coming in. But I want to move on to the specifics. I want to ask you a question right now, G. Your company is Enso Tires.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about why you're sitting here today to talk about product service systems. What's Enso Tires all about?
So what we're delivering is clean tires designed for electric vehicles, and we provide them as a service to those owners or users of those electric vehicles, with the ultimate goal of making tires circular. And when we talk about...
They already are, no?
Well, it is actually quite funny because, they're circular in appearance and shape, but not circular in content. And what we started looking at this industry, we saw that there are so many inefficiencies within it, but it's embedded with the product, how it's designed from day one and how it's used, which can be improved substantially. And when we looked at which market could the best improvements actually be delivered to, in particular, it was very apparent that it was with electric vehicles, because electric vehicles, of course, now are growing exponentially. We have the future is going to be electric quite aggressively. There are countries out there looking to ban the sale effectively of fossil fuel-driven cars in the next 10 years, looking at Holland and Norway. The German government as well is looking at it. So there's been this revolution for the electric car now for, I would say, for the last 10 years, coming from a very, very small incremental changes, and then suddenly this explosion. But when you look at the tire industry, it's still stuck in the old world. And we didn't see any disruption in that space to bring about the innovations that have happened in chemistry and molecular technologies into improving effectively what is now this growing market. So we are looking in particular at delivering then this disruption into the tire industry.
And you see the Enso tires as adding a great deal of value to electric vehicles?
Absolutely, because we can tailor the tire to the particular electric vehicles. We can have improvements, for example, in range, with range anxiety be one of the key things that stops people from actually acquiring an electric vehicle. And that allows us effectively to improve the vehicle externally without actually having to change anything with the vehicle itself. So an add-on benefit to any kind of electric vehicle by using better raw materials, cleaner raw materials at the same time, that we then can, once the product has been provided as a service to the user onto that vehicle for a set amount of period, we can then take that product back into our portfolio and reuse the raw materials ourselves and create a new product out of that as well.
When you say a new product?
So we produce the tires back into tires again.
So the tire becomes a tire again? So
absolutely.
The tread or whatever dies on the tire over time?
Only about 15% of the tire is actually used during its life cycle. 85% is then left over. So what do you do with it? It's highly refined product that then has effectively an afterlife that usually ends up being about either they're burnt for energy, which releases harmful chemicals into the environment, because tires have known toxins and carcinogens, or the tires are used for football fields or pavements, which again runs the risk of leaching out the same toxins into those local environments. So when we look at how we design the tire, we look to design the tire so that effectively whatever happens to the tire, it won't cause any environmental harm. Second, also because we are providing a service model, we can design a tire that has longevity in mind, so that we can provide or we make it with higher quality raw materials, which is designed at the same time, so it's a mutual benefit, to extend the performance. So not only do we extend the durability of the product, so it lasts longer, but at the same time the performance is increased. And when it comes to electric vehicles, the performance is in particular measured by range. So if you have an electric vehicle and you would like to extend the range of the vehicle, you have two options. You can either get a better battery, you can drive a bit slower and more efficiently, or you can get a better tire and keep the same battery and the same driving habits. So we aim to bring that into the mix with electric vehicles, and then effectively allow you to enhance your love affair with your own electric vehicle even further.
Wow, that sounds like quite an exciting affair. Perhaps something for Netflix, so if we ever do run out of films to watch. Enso tires, then a customer, whether that's an individual user or I don't know, a large company, they don't pay upfront for the tires. And this is quite a crucial point about product service systems, isn't it? That the cost is spread over time.
Absolutely. The challenge is that you have to take upfront certain key decisions from the customer standpoint, and the company also has to take key decisions upfront of how it provides that service. And for the customer, of course, he has to effectively be educated or see the benefits on a very clear-cut basis why he should choose a service rather than a product. And this goes to all product service business models, is that it can't be so complex for the customer that he has to make a very educated decision. I mean, he has to educate himself to a high level. But there should be enough awareness with the customer to make the right choice. So price, of course, is very much a factor here, is that we're strong believers in that the end price to the consumer cannot be substantially higher for the same amount of use. So we structure our proposal and our proposition to the customer so that the customer doesn't end up out of pocket in the end with the same amount of use as he would with a competing high quality product as well. But at the same time, of course, when you provide it as a service for the company's sake, you don't get that upfront payment from the customer when you sell them the product. You get it over time or over a set amount of use.
This puts strain perhaps on a
And
business.
that strains exactly
Yeah.
the question. You still have to purchase the raw materials, you still have to manufacture the product, you have to deliver it to the user, you have to market it, you have to provide all the essentials effectively to get it into the customer's hands, but you get paid over a longer period. So financing and financing structures now become very, very important for products as a service. It is actually the backbone of whether a product service model actually works. So without the right kind of financing structures behind it, especially when you're looking to scale, it becomes very, very hard to bring a substantial change to any industry unless you have that backing. But at the same time, when we discuss this with funding entities and banks, there's a lot of appetite for these new models, because what in return you get as well is that you get the ability for customer engagement over the long period. So it's not just a one-off sale, but you have this engagement with the customers. And what we're looking effectively with Enso is to engage very closely with our customers, and that's why we call them really value users, because our values with Enso should chime with their values, we hope. With electric vehicles, of course, a lot of the users for those vehicles are environmentally focused, or they're performance focused as well, because the Tesla S is the world's fastest performance car today that you can buy. You can't buy a faster car. So you have now, or faster up to 60 at least. So you have now performance and environmental factors being the key leaders in terms of electric vehicles. And we see the same chime with our users, because we are targeting in particular those who are turning to Enso for the performance that we can provide, as well as the environmental characteristics of our products, which are differentiated from the rest.
Sure.
And what we then offer the consumer is a product that doesn't cost them more, gives them better performance, and is good as the default setting. So if they don't want to choose our product, they effectively have to break bad and choose a negative product. So we believe that if you are on price parity and you embed the good into your product, the users, or a substantial number of users, will eventually come over to your side of the coin.
Well, great. Let's come on to that in just a second. We're going to cut to my colleague Vicky in just a minute. But first, Rich, I wanted to ask you a question, a sort of more general question, because what we're hearing from Enso Tires, and what I think we're going to hear from Natasha and Eon in just a few minutes' time, is that they're small and relatively young companies that are starting in this market of product service systems. But there must be companies out there right now who have been in the buying and selling game for a very long time, or the selling game, I suppose, for a very long time. Are there risks involved in switching your business model, the one that makes you money right now, to a product service system, which, as we've just heard from G, can have elements of doubt about it because the trickle in of cash can be a bit slower?
Yeah, I think the big fear as well is, are you cannibalizing your already healthy sales by doing something different? If you're making money selling products in a kind of normal retail model, and you switch to a product service system, do you jeopardize that current business by launching a new service? And does that have a kind of financially that can lead to very different cash flows? So that could be quite a rocky transition, but equally, I think a lot of companies look at that from why move away from that model when it's working for them? So I think there's an element of trepidation, because people aren't necessarily geared up for that kind of these new customer relationships, these kind of new design briefs that they're writing for themselves. That you're creating hardware that makes this service work. And yes, you can make these services work with existing hardware, but they won't work as well. So there's an element of new R&D that you need to get into. There's an element of new skills internally in your company that you need to develop. But equally, you look at all the rewards as well. Think about this, all this kind of you were talking about long-term communication with customers because you're constantly engaging with them. Whereas when you're in retail, you sell them something, then you have to fight for that sale all over again. It's a kind of a constant battle.
I think businesses underestimate users wanting to go for this model, and a great example, which we kind of tout maybe a bit too often, but it's, Blockbuster had the possibility of buying Netflix years ago. And didn't. And Netflix has completely destroyed Blockbuster. They destroyed effectively the whole product model for distributing of media of videos. So and now, who's the challenger to the BBC? I mean, you got Netflix now making one of the most successful television series that just came out, The Crown. And who would have thought that would ever happen from a distributor of content like them? But you have fundamental shifts in viewing habits and user habits, and we shouldn't underestimate the ability, especially for millennials and younger users who are already adopting service models from everything from their music to their cars that they drive on Zipcar or similar, or any other product as a service that they're already adopting. This is a fundamental disruption and trend that will seep across many major industries. Now, not every product can become a service necessarily. You can design a business plan around anything, like from the tables to the television set, anything. I mean, this plant even could be provided as a service. But fundamentally, for businesses to embrace products as a service, you need certain champions, of course, and certain success models. And it's effectively happening industry by industry, slowly. And there was always going to be companies that come up with ideas in this space that may or may not work. But I think that doesn't take away from the ultimate trend that this is effectively the world we're going to live in for the next decades.
I saw a quote recently, actually. Well, you know what the quote was from 2014? It said, the share of worldwide manufacturers by 2015 using performance-based service contracts will jump to 65%. Don't know, did you get any sense of how close that estimate was?
It's hard to gauge, isn't it? I think we're probably both slightly biased. So, I get a sense that's the direction we're travelling in. That there's a swell of people that are just kind of much more used to subscriptions, much more used to kind of different payment models, mobile transactions.
Yeah, the technology makes it much easier, right?
Yeah, technology is a massive enabler for this. All of the kind of like streetcar and city bike and like Barclays Bike and Believe, all of those things were very much enabled by mobile technology. You see things like the Amazon popped up. This was a while ago now, but they just next to the buy button they put the subscribe and save button, and it's just a little feature update that meant that you could make repeat purchases. Yep. But it's just kind of slipping into the mainstream where it's like actually it's a little bit cheaper if I subscribe, and all these things that kind of get you just out of the habit of assuming that buying is the default.
But there's a direction of travel. I'm going to stop you there just a second, G. I know you could just carry on for the next couple of days, and that's cool. But actually, in the next couple of days, there's a whole host of events coming up at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. And here to tell you about some of them is my colleague, Vicky.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Hi, I'm Vicky, and I'm going to tell you about a few of the hundreds of sessions we're running here at the DIF. And so one session we actually have today, directly after the session you're watching now, is by New Harvest, and Are Animal Products Without Animals the Future of Food? So this is around, growing meat, milk, eggs in labs. I mean, I know I'm very excited about eating my first burger that has been, grown in a laboratory. But we don't just have this session, we also have Building Urban Resilience, brought to you by Elizabeth from 100 Resilient Cities, and that's today as well. And that is, looking at growing urbanization, increasing populations, and the challenges and opportunities that will be faced by these issues. We also, for all those French speakers out there, we have 6 French sessions tomorrow, so make sure that you're there to reap the knowledge and discussion that will be going on around those sessions too. We very excitingly have a session tomorrow with Google around their circular economy principles that they're embedding across their organisation. And this is your opportunity to really direct some hard-hitting questions to them around what they're doing and how they're pursuing these issues. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have the Drivers of Change, which was our first studio session that was run here yesterday at the Diff. And you can catch up with that session now. We also have many of our other sessions available on Catch Up. So, if you do miss out on anything, don't worry. You can check in right now on thinkdiff.co. Thank you. Back to Colin.
Wonderful, Vicky. Thanks very much. Lots of great events to catch up on there. And of course, as we go through the 3 weeks of the Diff, there's going to be so much content available for you to watch at any time of day. And as soon as these events finish, we, as quickly as possible, make them available for you to watch again and again. Now, if you've been following the news, you might have noticed some changes happening in the United States. We're not going to talk about everything that's happening over there right now, but we are going to transfer ourselves across to New York, where we're going to hear from Natasha Frank, who has got a very young business model called Eon. And Natasha, your business model is all about product service systems. Are you there, Natasha? Can you hear us okay?
Hi there. Yes, I can hear you okay. We're still recovering here from a traumatic election. Great to be here, and thank you so much for having us. We at Eon, we have been working on a product as a service model, and it was great to listen to the two of you speak and discuss some of the challenges, especially regarding capital for product as a service business models and the financing for them, because that definitely comes into play. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, one, the financing aspects, because I think that's invaluable to really getting one of these businesses off the ground, as well as new technology that really enables product as a service business models to be feasible and enables the efficiencies necessary for a reverse logistics business. So first, to give you a background on Eon, what we're doing is, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So basically, looking at the fast fashion movement, the Zara's, the H&M's, and this growth of disposable clothing, and the fact that women and consumers are wearing a lot of their items, almost 80% of their wardrobe, 1 to 3 times. Very low wear, which is a waste of money and resources, of course. So what we're looking to do at Eon is build in a service model where we can actually increase wears of clothes, and by Eon taking responsibility for the item, actually upcycle and recycle the item at end of life. So if you're familiar with any sort of rent the runway business model or any sort of rental model, the challenges of those businesses is that the consumer generally views them as a service that they should use on special occasions only. So there's a very high customer acquisition cost because your customer will use your product 1 or 2 times. You're also handicapped in that you can't infiltrate the woman's everyday wardrobe, which is where a lot of the economics really are, right? To have your customer using your product on a daily basis. So through a subscription model, we basically reduce the transaction nature of a clothing rental company and transition into a service model. We also enable customers to have the experience of fast fashion because their wardrobe is constantly on rotation, but actually increase the wears of clothes and upcycling and recycling. Also from an economic perspective, we enable women to access products that they couldn't generally afford. And we believe that there's an opportunity to start repositioning and rebranding access over ownership business models, not as a choice that a consumer makes because they can't afford, but rather as a choice based on conscientious and sustainable lifestyle values. So the demographic that we're targeting and where we really see growth within this space is among millennials between 25 and 34. They are used to this world of disposable fashion. They want to keep up with trends. And in the world of Facebook and social media, they do want that variety built into their wardrobe, which can be made possible through an access over ownership business model. And we're approaching this in a slightly different way from a brand perspective than how a lot of rental platforms present their service. Most rental platforms position it as you rent basically because you can't afford the product. and we are giving you access to something that you can't afford, we're actually putting the sustainability mantra first and introducing rental as, no, you actually rent because it's a conscientious lifestyle decision. It's sustainable, and echoing on this Marie Kondo lifestyle of less is more. If you guys are familiar with that book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, right? How can consumers actually declutter their life, and how can they view access as the ultimate luxury? So that's a little bit on the repositioning and rebranding that we're introducing to the rental market. And from the logistics perspective, we're really focusing on using RFID and item level tagging to basically enable the same kind of intelligence as you see in the supply chain on the reverse logistics side. RFID and item level tagging basically enables us to efficiently track each and every product at an item level much more efficiently than with a barcode. And it's these kind of tech efficiencies that will make these kind of businesses profitable. It also enables us to start experimenting with the new growth of products brought online or smart apparel with a cloud-based identity. We are working with one of the first RFID threads, which is basically an RFID tag in the form of a thread. So it's invisible and not noticeable to the consumer, so they won't be bothered by it, won't feel the need to remove it, and it can actually survive dry cleaning in the entire life cycle. This technology is relatively new, so that kind of intelligence really facilitates this and makes this business model economically feasible. We're also using that same RFID tag to upcycle and recycle the apparel at end of life. So basically, one of the biggest barriers in textile recycling is material transparency. So it's the fact that when this shirt arrives, the recycler doesn't know the material content. So what happens today is someone will pick up the material and give their best guess. Is this cotton? Is this polyester? And they'll sort by that. Well, the World Economic Forum has now identified RFID tagging as a way to automatically sort and separate. So now when the products come in, our recycling partners are able to read, okay, this is actually a cotton sweater and this is actually cashmere. And those RFID tags basically carry the recycling intelligence and the information necessary for recycling, which is where the fully closed loop system starts to get manageable with intelligent asset technology.
I see the benefits of taking that approach, of course, Natasha, but it involves more collaboration. I guess it involves a little bit more infrastructure as well. Well, not infrastructure per se, but it involves the technology being at the recyclers, right? How are they going to know that they should be scanning this piece of clothing but not this one?
Yeah, so basically because we are taking the items back at end of life, we're renting our garments to Susie and Barbara and Sarah, right? And then when the garments are finished, they're coming back to us, which enables us to then share the garments with textile recyclers that we're working with who have this technology, right? Because we actually wanted to, we wanted to make this end of life intelligence more available, but we realized that in order to do so, you're right, you need to have mass market change where all the recyclers have it. But by actually changing the business model so that we are responsible for disposal, we can pick which recyclers to partner with for this.
Makes perfect sense. You were going to tell us about deployment and how the whole scheme operates, is that right?
Yeah, did you want me to talk a bit about capital or?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, so basically from a financial perspective, we're looking at interesting ways where we can partner with brands and do revenue share to reduce capital expenditure for us on the purchasing side. This has gone over somewhat successfully with a few brands actually, where we're reducing our CapEx and basically entering a revenue share model with them. And that makes it easier to finance our business. We're also working with our customers to actually help us finance. So if you ever have visited a woman's luxury online shop, like a Moda Operandi, they will basically say, okay, if you want this to be the first one who has this Balenciaga leather jacket, you have to order it a season in advance. So we are looking to give our customers access to a certain collection of clothing where we thereby get a subscription fee up front. And that will support some of the CapEx necessary to finance the business. So from a sustainability perspective, we're also working with the brands that are partnered with on the platform to help them close the loop. So let's say we're renting a Helmut Lang cashmere sweater. If we have that cashmere sweater at end of life and we're able to upcycle it and recycle it, we can actually work to get that cashmere back to Helmut Lang so they can actually reproduce a new cashmere sweater from that, where it becomes a fully closed loop system there and actually helps the brands use recycled materials from their very own products.
Natasha, I guess the big question a lot of people would have for product service systems, those skeptics who might be watching this might say to themselves, it sounds like a lot of work from your side, and I guess it's a question to you as well, G. It sounds like a lot more work for your side because there's new technologies that are coming in, there's new partnerships that you have to develop, there is that ongoing communication with the customer. All of these things, and there's a myriad of other things I probably haven't thought of, all come with costs, right? Staff time, technology time, equipment costs. So how on earth can a business model like this make money?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, it's RFID. You would, right now, Zara puts an RFID tag on every single item that they rent or they sell, right? Any rental company uses a barcode. They're all using item level tagging technology. It's just that the systems that they have actually make it more expensive for them to operate. So when you sell something or you're building an inventory system, you will be RFID tagging your items anyway, right? So we would have to do that no matter what. And any rental business looks to increase the efficiencies around that. So the RFID actually for us ends up being really a vast improvement in efficiencies and not an increased cost.
So
because it would be used in any point of sale business as well.
So you're kind of surfing on the wave of current technology, I guess. You're just making more intelligent use of it.
Exactly. We're just using it for the whole life cycle. We would be paying to add that RFID tag anyway, and we're just saying we're going to use that intelligence throughout the entire life cycle.
Right, and Eon is it's not open for the general public to subscribe to clothes just yet. I believe you've only been in operation for a very short time. You want to tell us how old you are?
We're launching, we are in the world of fashion, so we recognize there's some air of exclusivity and personality to building a brand. So we actually launched by membership only here in Manhattan, and we have 35 women on the platform, basically who subscribe, receive 3 items a month, and exchange at will, exactly like a Netflix and DVD kind of system, right? But just swap those DVDs for apparel. So it's been incredibly well received. The women love it. They feel that economically they're getting more bang for their buck because they're able to wear higher end brands, have more product, and basically from an efficiency perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, for them, they don't have to dry clean and maintain. So we have built all that into it in the way that it actually feels more like a luxury service, even though it's an economic decision for most of them. So our website is up, but again, only available to members right now, and we'll be launching to the general public in January.
Nice one, Natasha. Time, unfortunately, is slipping through our fingers.
I'm done.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. But you're not done, so don't disappear, because I'm going to ask a final question of all of us who's sitting here today. We've heard, obviously, from enthusiasts, we've heard examples of product service systems, and we've heard the bigger picture examples as well, and all the benefits of them, such that the customer gets a more durable product, that perhaps you would have a higher quality product than you could afford, that you don't have the high upfront costs, perhaps it fits with a more ethical, environmental side of things too. So let me ask you this question first, Rich. Mm-hmm. Those are all the upsides we've talked about, and there might be a couple more. What are the downsides? What's holding back the product service?
I think maybe it's a more, depending what you're doing, depending what the product service system is, I think it can be a more complex development route because you're playing this sort of chicken and egg game with product and service. If it's something that's enabled by new hardware, then you've got some new technology you need to develop, but you've got a service you need to develop at the same time. You kind of want to prove the service out, but the hardware might be enabling the service. So it adds a layer of complexity in that development process that's maybe not there with a kind of standard retail model where you've got a product you're making and you do some testing and you go and make it. It's a slightly more complex process.
So very quickly for you, G, why is that more complex process worthwhile?
Well, I mean, if in the case of Enzo, actually, the process is a lot easier. Have you ever tried to buy a tire?
I guess, yeah.
It's not necessarily an easy process, and it's about you having to go somewhere, and the guy behind the counter effectively sells you what he wants at the price that you need to buy them. It's a product that is not necessarily based on any kind of passion. It's a utility product. It's a product that often is compromised in some respects because there's so many different qualities, there's so many different characters behind the product. What we bring to it is a simplification, effectively, of that. So the point here is that we will design the product that can be verified as being extending the range of that particular electric vehicle, that we can verify that it's clean, we can verify that you don't pay more for it than you would as a comparatively high-end product as well. So those things are verified up front, but the onboarding of that customer relationship is complex. Because it's a different dialogue. But luckily in the tire industry, we already have a very complex onboarding anyway. Now, one other point I just want to touch upon is that and this is helpful for us in some respect, is that because we're not really building sales channels, we're building service channels. We don't have the conflict of having an existing sales channel to sell products that competes with our service channels. And for service-based models, it's very important that people not confuse the two together too much, because the service model is a distinctly different approach to the customer and engages that customer at a different level. So we can not only provide them the product, but additional benefits related to the product, related to their vehicle. And so giving customers that kind of choice is something that's new, and for Eon, it's a great model, I think, as well, because I used to live in Manhattan, and I know how important fashion is for the girls down there. So you could see that you're tapping onto here a live wire that could definitely become very full of energy and bring you a good charge. So I think it's very cool what you're doing down there.
Oh, thank you.
So one final question for you then, Natasha, since G set me up. Will we all be subscribing to fashion in the next decade, do you think? How big is this going to be?
Yeah, I think that with apartments getting smaller and smaller in the world too, people don't really want to or have the room to hold on to a lot of stuff. So I think there will be more changes in seasonality, and people will have a lighter stock at home. Obviously, always carrying the staples. Only about 2% of customers or consumers right now are involved in some form of consumer rental service. So it's a very small percentage of the market right now. We do see it changing. The Google search increase for rental of apparel has gone up 250% within the past 2 years. So consumers are thinking about it, searching it, looking for it, and it's becoming much more comfortable to have that kind of service, as well as perceived really as a luxury and an asset to the customer lifestyle. So I think a much bigger percentage, but maybe you men will always hold on to your basic blue button-ups.
And on that point then, Natasha, G and Rich, thank you so much for joining us for this event about product service systems.
Thank you.
And well, many people have told me that I should start subscribing to fashion. Maybe I should learn how to say that properly first as well. Perhaps I should be looking into such business models that we've heard of here today. There's many, many more events coming up at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. There's some starting in 15 minutes time. There's probably something else that's live online right now as well. So thinkdiff.co is the place to be. Or if you're on Twitter, use #thinkdiff. Join in the conversation and start asking us more questions and watching all these events. Thanks very much, and I'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.